Friends, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my co-host and murder brain,
Alex Dandino.
All right. Before we start today's show, a little business. Guys, please take a second right now. Do it this second. Leave us a rating and review wherever you find the show, especially if that happens to be Apple Podcast app. That's how we fight back against the algorithmic overlords. 5-star sentence or two about why you enjoy spending time with us means the world to shows like us. Thank you to those of you who've done that. It does mean the world to us. Go to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, Film Alchemist. You can see video versions of most of our podcasts and a lot of cool other stuff we work on for you over there. So again, Film Alchemist on YouTube. You can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, or find us on all the social media that you're on. That's a great way to get a hold of us and let us know movies you'd like to hear us talk about, be they new, old, theme for a whole month, double feature, guest host, whatever you want to hear about. I want to know about it. I do keep a master list. As you guys know, every December we do all listener selections. We try to dunk them in there and use them to guide the show as much as possible. So if you've sent us a request, know that I have seen it and I have taken note. So we will get to them all eventually. All right. That's enough business for today. All right. We're back in court defending a law-abiding citizen until he done with the law and he abides his own laws. Alex, today we're talking about law-abiding citizen. I must confess, I had never seen this movie before. I had many of my friends over at Junk Food Cinema tell me how much they loved this movie, and I thought they were all full of shite. I got to say, egg on the face. They were right. This movie kicks ass. Alex, walk me through your opening thoughts on Law-Abiding Citizen.
I've also never seen this movie, never thought to watch this movie. However, it was awesome. Like, it's one of those movies where it really kind of snuck up how much I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It has this whole, like, I love the remake of Man on Fire with Denzel Washington. And like one-man army movies kind of get me. Like, I like those kinds of things. Like, I like that kind of shit. But I mean, like, man, what a fucking tour de force for what I will say is, like, hoping one of the last movies I ever have to watch Gerard Butler not use his native accent in.
How dare you?
I like his accent. That's the only reason I say that.
Oh, man. Yeah, I thought he was great in this. I do think it was probably the Gerard Butler bargain bin vibe that I got from this. I should have fucking known the Jamie Foxx's. I should have known.
It was like going to be this Gamer. Like, Gamer's another movie I think I lumped in with this, where I was like, it's not really my thing. But like,
now I gotta go watch it. It might
of
also be Kick-Ass. Who knows?
You know what's interesting? I was reading. Apparently, this was originally supposed to be role reversal, and Jamie Foxx was supposed to play Clyde with Gerard Butler. There's like conflicting stories about how it ended up being swapped, but so well. I cannot honestly, like, I'm not sure it would have like changed anything. They both are so good in their respective roles. Yeah, well,
it's really funny you say that, because specifically, right, Jamie Foxx is perfect for his role.
Because he's really good.
I was debating this in my mind, right? If you did a top 5, who are the most charismatic actors, A-list actors in Hollywood right now? I think you would make the case that Jamie Foxx is number 1, right? I feel like Will Smith has kind of been pulling back a little bit. His movies aren't, necessarily of the same caliber. You're like, maybe Tom Hanks, that's likable. That's not raw charisma, right? I feel like whenever Jamie Foxx is in a movie, you fucking love that guy. You want to be that guy, right? Like the James Bond rules. I want to hang out with that guy. I emulate him. I think you could make a case he's right up there, top couple most charismatic actors. What is really cool about watching him in this is that what he does so well is weaponized against him. His charisma makes him a fucking slimier snake.
Yeah. I think that's a really fascinating thing about this role reversal or role, whatever it was supposed to be. It was not the case. So, I mean, I think it's really interesting because James has the harder task here of being the, like, it's not the villain. Like, I think this is the really important thing about this whole thing is like, he's not the bad guy. He's just the system itself.
This is the question you'll have to grapple with, right? And part of why the ending made me so furious, he's not a bad guy in the traditional sense, right? Especially when you think about this movie starts us off with the worst guys, right? This movie starts off where it's just, here's a happy family. The dad and daughter are making bracelets. He's getting a little work done. Oh, honey, it smells great. Ding dong, right? Banging on the door. He answers the door and hard reality hits him in the head, right? In the form of a baseball bat. And we watch this man be beaten, bound, and gagged, and watch and scream and cry, helpless, impotent, right? As this movie's trying to tell us, right? To help out his own family, to watch his wife not only murdered, but violated. And then the ultimate horror is just the casual nature where that little girl's at the end of the hall and that fucking monster just picks her up like she's a Cabbage Patch doll, walks off frame. They don't show her screaming, nothing. They don't have to. They know they've already hammered us with that image, right? And it is horrifying. It's everyone's worst nightmare made manifest, right?
Absolutely.
And so the movie starts us off at that point. So the hard act they have to do is right after that, setting the stage with Jamie Foxx. And we see him, right? He's like, oh, I'm shooting for way higher than your job. He's like this slick 96% conviction rate guy. He's talking it up, but you're like, oh, he's cool. He's cool. I'm with him. He's on Gerard Butler's side. Of course, he's a good guy. I'm going to like him. And as soon as he realizes, oh, it's going to be hard, he cops out not because he thinks he'll, justice or anything like that. He doesn't want to risk his
percentage
conviction rate. And so you could make the case that, because Gerard Butler says it later in the movie, right? Which is, lessons not learned in blood are easily forgotten. And that justice should be the most hard to those who bend it when they're supposed to dispense it. Something that's paraphrasing, but I think that's what they're telling us in the movie is that Jamie Foxx and all of these people are tasked with being in charge of this shit and to think that they're criminals as well. And I'm sure you picked up on this because it's not subtle, but essentially every line of dialogue in the movie is meant to reinforce the willingness with which every single person working in the system is willing to break a law to get what they want. Right? Like it's every fucking scene and every line of dialogue a character has is fuck them laws. That's like the whole movie. So you could argue they are bad guys.
I mean, yes, look, I'm not saying that, movie puts the system on trial.
Yeah.
As the pod does as well. But like the movie is about how corrupt the system is, how is like the scene that I always go to. Look, I know we're kind of skipping ahead, but that scene when Clyde's brought into the court with the judge.
That's the scene where I was like, this movie is something different. That's where it goes against what you think's happening. Yeah.
Up until that point, yeah, I was kind of like, all right, I get it. He's like master spy or whatever. Yeah. Then he fucking drives it home where he's like, you are the one who fucked up. Yeah. Like that was when I was like, this might be a little different than what I'm already anticipating it was. But like that scene I point to is like such a great example of what this movie is about, is like, it's about system on trial, and not just the system, but the people who allow the system to fail. That is like, that's what, and yeah, like Jamie Foxx's character, Nick is a good spirited person and he understands the spirit of the law, but he's so caught up in he has to do to be the lawyer, quote unquote, that he can be, he forgets the like pretty much the main rule of prosecuting the bad guys, which is you have to put the bad guys away in the way that they should be. Like, you have to serve justice. Justice must be served. And just because you're giving your brand of your brand of justice is not true justice. That, I think, is probably the thing that's most prevalent throughout the movie, is like the brand of justice that we are served previous to Clyde's rampage is not the brand of justice. That's not what we should be getting.
Yeah, well, it's the question of who is that justice serving, right? Because there's that great moment when Clyde comes home and he's supposed to go to his daughter's recital. And he's like, I can't. I got work. We'll watch it on DVD later. That's fine. And his wife's begging him, please come. And the daughter has been even indoctrinated, right? So that's that weird 10-year time jump that they don't really address until the end of the movie. She's like, wow, he did a lot of homework on these guys in a day. Oh, shit, it's 10 years. The daughter's now like in high school. Like, they just throw that shit in there. Like, he was talking to her in the because this is the fucked up thing, right? So anyways, I'm jumping around. But the line he says in the kitchen, right, which is, why daddy can't be at the recital. Why is that? Because daddy puts the bad guys away. And he's like, yep, daddy locks up the bad guys. And we as an audience know that's not true. So it's interesting how they show us relatable lies that Nick tells. How Nick is a scumbag, but he's still an everyman, because I feel like a lot more of us than we want to admit put a lot of things in front of our family, and we create these white knight scenarios about ourselves.
Absolutely. You're never going to tell. What's great is like the scene after too, is when they go to the lethal injection thing, and he's got his assistant there, played by, I never remember her name, actress who's, Leslie Bibb. That's her name. Leslie Bibb plays her, like his, like, she's like a second lawyer, like following him around.
We'll have to talk about that in a minute, but
that scene, what's really great, because he's like, I put the bad guys away, and then he goes to, like, he's just going to an execution. It's not putting the bad guy away. It's literally,
right.
You don't need to be there for that.
Yeah, well, he admonishes the other lawyer, because he's like, oh, just getting some press, and it's like, bitch, you're getting some press.
What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
it's not seeing your own hypocrisy is the crime that Nick. It's more than ever. More than anything, Nick's problem, he does not see the flaws in his own game. And that, I think, is what makes him relatable, but still not necessarily the best guy. He's in, like, there's no physical antagonist for me in this movie, because everybody is fucked up. But like the ethereal judgment world is the bad in this movie. Like the mess, flawed law of man, the problem is in this movie. And that's what it does so well, is by using all these different pieces, like from the warden to the people who committed the crimes, to the lawyers who prosecute, to the lawyers who defend, to the judge herself. Everybody's on trial in the minds of man. And I think that's what makes Law Abiding Citizen interesting, movie worth watching, and not just like you were saying, like Walmart Gerard Butler movie. It's got some legs. It's got heat.
Yeah, well, they do a great job with Nick too, which is like, the boss comes down on, hey lady, don't talk in the lawyer boys room, and he's like, hey, she's right, she should try the case, and he gets her one, and you're like, oh, look at him. And then by the end of the movie, you're like, oh, they've been fucking, right? Like everything he does that is kind of okay and good, they pair it immediately with something kind of slimy, right? Yeah. But yeah, it gets back to, I think of this movie a lot in that scene you said when they drag him in front of the judge. This is the mastermind guy. I thought it was going a little Cape Fear, right? Like he had memorized all the statutes, and she was going to let him go. And he goes, you fucking idiots. He's like, there you go. You were going to let me fucking go. This is the fucking problem. And that's when you're like,
oh, you guys.
Because I did have a couple buddies I was talking to about this, and they were talking about, well, it's not very logical. And I was like, all right, take that shit aside, right? Because it's a fucking Gerard Butler movie, right? About a law-abiding murdering citizen. Anywho, it's like, take that logic shit out, right? What I think this really plays as is this kind of Grimm's fairy tale, right? These are people who cheat. And now we're playing in an alternate reality, right? This doesn't feel like a very real world grounded story. This is a larger than life fable about good and evil, right? Like when we hear a judge say, I'm a judge, I can do whatever I want. I will willingly break a law that I just kind of scoffed at how illegal it would be to do it because I can do whatever I want. And her fucking ear explodes out of her cell phone, right?
Which is insane.
Insanely. This movie has awesome kills.
Great kills, by the way. That was nuts.
But I'm saying that's not a super realistic moment of a movie. There's not a lot of logic to that. That's fable logic. This is a person who did the bad thing, so they get eaten by the wolf, right? And I think if you take the movie into that realm, right, and I think a lot of those little issues that you could try to nitpick away just don't fucking matter, right? Like it doesn't matter that the lawyer's leading the investigation and driving around with cops.
Yeah,
throw that shit out.
No.
These are people trapped in an island of the damned. Think of this as purgatory, right? I think because you see it from the very first moment, right? It does feel horribly rooted to the reality of this world, right? Which is we see that opening scene and then him having to tell Nick, this is the best justice we can get, even though he's lying. And when we see Nick shake hands with the bad guy after he's like, you can't fight fate, you know, and he's like, I'm glad the system finally worked. And he has that cringy fucking photo. And you see in the distance Gerard Butler watching that.
Yeah.
And then he goes home to his apartment. He's like, hey, stay in that tummy, baby. This world's full of crazy ass people. Every single thing we see after that moment in the film feels like a kind of morality Thunderdome, right? This feels like a different world where now we're going to play out consequences of your deals with the devil.
Well, they're trying to... It's interesting. The beginning of this movie does a lot of work to try to justify Jamie Foxx's actions as a lawyer, to like explain that he's not a slimy prosecutor. He's trying to do right by his family or whatever. Like bullshit. Like I don't buy any of that. Like he's keeping his conviction rate up and that's what he does. Like he's a lawyer. He's a shark. That's what they do. So when they fast forward 10 years and he's still this case, this is like the thing that I think is really interesting about this kind of thing is like, imagine all the other cases he's probably made deals like this on. Like, why is this one important? Why is this one sticking to him? And that's the thing I kept coming back to is like, it's because all the other ones Jamie Foxx knows, this is the one he knows did not serve any sort of justice whatsoever. All it served was singular, which is him. And that I think is really important. And that is why you can't absolve, because like, I got to be honest, by the middle of the movie, I was like, can we not, come on, man, let Jamie Foxx, like, you can't don't go after Nick. Like Nick is trying, or Nick's trying to be a better, like, but he's not. It was a cardinal sin he committed. It was greed. It was vanity.
And you feel like he's been continually making.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, the one thing I thought too is I was like, I don't want this movie because there's the scene when they send the murder tape and his daughter watches it. And I was like, no. Yeah. And I was like, I desperately don't want this movie to become, I'm going to take your family away. And thank God the movie didn't either,
because then he's not sympathetic like that.
Yeah, because I think they know they're victims of Nick as well, right? And this is the thing, I don't think of Nick. I never felt sympathy for Nick for 1 second of the movie. And honestly, I don't
think sympathy is the word I'd use.
Well, let me just leap ahead to a gripe I have. I was pissed that this movie ended with Nick watching his daughter's recital and smiling like he's a good man. I thought that was such a fucking pussy ending. The fact that Nick just somehow, well, one, the ending kind of falls apart because it's the super genius tactician who does everything for a reason. You think we're building to this Seven moment, right? Where, he's left a lot of clues just lying around his fucking changing room and tunnels that lead right to his cell. You're like, okay, he's moving Nick in. Him and Nick have the showdown. He's got him where he wants. And he's like, I didn't expect company. I would have cleaned up. Oh God, you locked me in and you're going to use my bomb on me. Oh, fuck. At least I'm a good teacher. And he just like burns away. And then Nick's like, oh, thank God, recitals slap in real life. And I was like, this fucking asshole does not deserve the happy ending whatsoever. Is he not scummier than every other person that gets destroyed other than the criminals from the opening scene?
Yeah, I was going to say the criminals from the opening scene are definitely scummier than he is.
Granted.
I'm not sure I would interpret it that way necessarily. For me, Nick is... This is like... I mean, this movie ends up being really about... I'm glad we picked it, actually. Because this movie ends up being much more about the lesson to teach a man of law what the true law of man is. That's a really important thing.
Yeah, like, this is the perfect pairing with the lessons not talked about in Primal Fear.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
That ending scene where Richard Gere's like, better go back to harassing, and he pauses for
I'm going to go back to
second.
sexually harassing Laura Linney.
Yeah, this movie says, what if there's a consequence to that shit?
Well, so this movie also says, and this is like the finals, like, I'm not going to lie, like the final scene is also one of those things. It definitely got me because it's one of those things where I'm like, I get what's happening is Gerard Butler understands there's a rule, like there is a law of man, and then there is just the laws that sit above us. And one of those is like, there are consequences to your actions. Gerard Butler accepts consequences. I think that's a really important thing. Gerard Butler killed so many people. He understands that there's no way that he can just saunter off. And that's a really important beat in the movie. So what he does is he accepts fate that no matter what's coming for him. To Jamie Foxx, borrowed time. He says, you realize, without saying it, he gives him this moment of like, go be with your family like I want to be with mine. And if you're going to like keep doing what you're doing, you have not learned a single fucking thing. And I think that's a really hard about this. So yeah, like it ends a little less 70 than I think you and I would have preferred. But the resolution will pretty resound, which is that like playing Jamie Foxx's character, Nick, Clyde telling Nick, basically, you are now going to be living on borrowed time, courtesy of this man who showed you what real law can be. That to me is a very powerful statement, a very powerful ending to a movie.
Well, let me ask you this. Why was Nick never on the line? When all the cars blow up in the parking lot, Nick's car was clean, right? When he has the fucking 50 caliber bomb shotgun robot and just waste that vehicle. And then he's like, for good measure, rocket, boop, right? Why not Nick's car? So Nick is at once the target of this lesson and must bear witness to all this devastation. But at the end of the movie, I do not feel like Nick learned the lesson, right? Because he says in there, I don't make deals with criminals. I learned the lesson. Right. I'm like, this is not the same thing. What are you talking about? And then he just walks out and you're like, do I think now? Because that's the thing. When the mayor's doing that shady shit and he's like, I'll resign. And he's like, I think that would be best. And she's like, bullshit. And he gets a promotion, a fucking promotion. So what the movie is telling him is that he did do everything right. Do you think he stops becoming the DA just because he made a recital?
I think he becomes a DA. Like this is the really complex thing about this movie, I think. I mean, I guess it's not so complex. So like, it's not like I'm capable of understanding it, but this is like the thing that I loved the most about it is that everything about what Nick has to go through is about is Clyde teaching a lesson that I'm not sure he's hoping, because like Nick being the last person on the list I'm giving this to you. You're going to learn from everybody else's mistakes that you're the person who should have done the right thing in the first place. Like, I can't guarantee that the ends and Nick's like, well, I'm definitely not going to do anything like that again. But the idea that Clyde has is that Clyde teaches, thus endeth the lesson. That's like the important thing about how this goes, is that Clyde spends the entire movie teaching him a lesson, and everything is strategic. Michael Kelly, who by the way plays like a CIA operative in every single fuck movie, I swear to God, Michael Kelly is the CIA guy who Bruce McGill and Jamie Foxx like meet with, and he literally tells them, he's like, whatever he to do it, and unless you're going to walk into his jail cell and put up his head, you're dead. If he wants you dead, you're going to die. Like a really, to me, I carried that through the rest of the movie. I'm like, all of this is supposed to be on purpose. There's nothing about like Clyde, I think, knew he was going to wind up there.
But I think that's the problem, is that they set him up as this absolute mastermind. And I feel like the last like 15 minutes kind of unravels a lot of that. But it's a super fun game while it plays, right? The first half of the movie is stellar. It's so good and so fast. And it's him, calling the guy, hey, drugs and whores, huh? Run. And then he gets him. And then he just turns into, once he starts like the puffer fish poison in the gun and I'm going to mangle your fucking body. And we see the remains. You're like, oh, fuck. Like this, I understand. This be vengeance, right? That part of the movie makes absolute perfect sense. Getting butt naked just to flex on the cops. Weird, but okay. Sure, you work out a lot. You want to show it off one last time. Fine. Everything else, right? Even oh my God, when he fucking stabs the shit out of his cellmate with the T-bone, and we juxtapose that with they do two really good juxtaposes. Whereas when they're cross-cutting between the recital and the death penalty.
Yep.
And that's horrifying. And then when they cut between him having the nice, friendly steak dinner and them trying to find the guy who's buried underground, and he's literally dead because he didn't follow the bargain of 1 o'clock, right? And then he fucking stabs that guy with the fucking bone. And even in that moment, right? So when that happens in the movie, you're going, fuck, this has to be some greater piece. Why would you stab that guy? It doesn't make sense. This guy, because that's the thing, the movie wants us in a way to somewhat root for Gerard Butler.
Oh, yeah. We're rooting for Gerard Butler in this movie. You're supposed to.
Starts to slide. You're like, you can tell off a judge. You can make him bring you a mattress and food. That shit's funny. And your iPod, that's all great, right? You're running him around, showing him the flaws in the system. When he brutally kills that guy with the T-bone and is covered in their blood, that's the first scene in the movie we see a true representation of what he has become through his loss. And it's a weird, that's when it becomes he's so much more nefarious. And then we get the CIA drop or whatever. And I feel like that almost sets the stage too high for him. Like that's a lot of pieces to keep juggling in the air. That's a hard screenwriting trick. And I feel like they just kind of dropped it at the end because he didn't seem as clever the way the ending unfolded.
I mean, to
but
me,
the point is still served. I'm with you on that. The point is still served.
I think that is it's interesting because that's to me like kind of that's the balancing act of these kinds of movies. The really difficult thing about making an action movie set inside a legal drama, which is really what this is that you have to, we talk a lot on the show about the giving the one, like these kinds of movies though require you to give. The one has to be like thematic almost. Like to root for Gerard Butler in this movie, you kind of have to be like mildly amoral. Like you have to other than the kills on the actual criminals, the other people who die in this movie, you have to kind of be like okay with it moving forward, or this movie does not work. Like I think it is a very, very difficult sell to, and like it's awesome to see because you're just like, whoa, what a kill. But like blowing a judge's head off with a cell phone you're like, Jesus, like that's like a whole other level. And like he stops, he ratchets up, he kills Bruce McGill, he kills Leslie Bibb, he kills all these people. Like I don't even remember Leslie Bibb in the beginning.
Mostly lawyers though, right? They kind of stay away from like cops and people that you're like, traditionally accepted to be like unkillables in movies. Right.
Well, and like it's interesting, like the cops are the ones who fucked up the crime scene, and yet none of them are no retribution sought against them.
I thought those cops were getting wasted so many times and they just kept surviving. I think this is one of those movies that's a little wink and a nod. They know who's buying this movie and that perhaps their audience doesn't want to see a bunch of cops get killed. But they're like, lawyers and judges have at them.
This movie was not made in 2020, but yes.
Yeah, no shit, right? But this is difficult times. But yeah,
that's what I'm saying. This movie is very recontextualized in 2021.
But this is the thing, though, right? Is that this movie asks you to try to choose between two legal systems, right? This is the code of Hammurabi. Is that his name? The eye for an eye, right?
Eye for an eye, yes.
But then, philosophers come along and say an eye for an eye leaves the world blind. Is that any better? Or this corrupt fucking nuanced, all these fucking bullshits and backdoors and tricks that inevitably are going to lead. Yeah, the wrong brutal murderer got the death penalty and the other guy was just doing drugs and hookers. And we know in our mind that's wrong based on that visceral fucking horrifying opening nightmare scene. But I think what you would say by the end is that neither is very foolproof, right? Because who was driving? The old white hair guy, his boss. Who was driving that?
Gil.
Yeah, who was driving Bruce McGill, right? Whoever's driving him was not criminally liable for whatever happened. Like they probably weren't even at his case. They're just a duty cop getting wasted, right?
Right.
That sucks. So Gerard Butler, by nature, right? To kill that inmate with a steak bone, you could say he's a criminal, whatever. We don't know what his fucking, what if he was just in for possession, right? Oh, I had a joint. Now I'm in here getting fucking stabbed with some dude's leftovers.
Right.
That's not justice, right? As it were.
I mean, I think that's again, like it's that part of it ends up being like a means to an end. Like why that guy? What did he? Well, he's a criminal, so he automatically gets murdered. And like, but overall, the people who are culpable for the issue, for what Clyde perceives as a grave injustice, which it was, are people who are supposed to uphold the rule of the land. And I think that's kind of it's constant struggle. And again, like very impressed how well it does for most of the movie, handling like kind of complex morality. Like there's a lot of gray area in murdering people who wrong you. There's even more gray area in murdering people who are part of the system that's supposed to right the wrong almost. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, again, like this movie spends so much time getting you to root for Gerard Butler that by the end, when Jamie Foxx is sitting there listening to his kid's recital, doing what any good parent should have been doing in the first place, you sort of, I don't know, this weird feeling of like, this is not like, to me, I got to the end, I'm like, this can't be the end. Not that like this can't be the end of the movie, but like can't be the end of what I think will be lifelong Ishmael's character. Like he'll have to wonder. And I think almost that's the greatest lesson that Clyde could teach Nick in this movie, is simply like, you will always be looking over your shoulder now, wondering, did I wrong the wrong man? Like,
well, you could also
I'm putting
look
someone
at
behind
it,
bars.
Yeah, I mean, you could also look at it as he loses his job, because they would definitely investigate and be like, that was a lot of fucking murders. Oh, because you fucked up this case. And then they at one point in the film, they just casually declare martial law of Philadelphia. So that's not going unanswered for, right? As soon as martial law's gone, the mayor's got to find some way to explain this shit away.
A lot of money.
He's getting had, right? Like he's done. He's fucking done. So maybe this is just a man who's lost everything and now he's outside of the system, and that's his breath of fresh air to lead
more than likely what he's doing at the recital is coming back from his law school teaching job, because that's for sure what he wound up happening.
Yeah, I mean, he's
I don't know. Did you get the sense at the end of the movie though that he like in that scene, is he a different man because he's no longer the DA? Or is he a different man because this has changed him fundamentally? Because he also now officially committed murder, by the way.
No, he moved a bomb. Gerard Butler called it. So technically he didn't. He let Gerard Butler, whose job title used to be brain, not have any idea that once they found his fucking tunnels, they could maybe booby trap them. Like it's fucking madness. Take that shit out, right? That's just Gerard Butler can't win or survive this film. He absolutely can't. Because the sad reality is that when this movie ends, the rest of us still have to live in this country and deal with this legal system. It has to end with us believing that Jamie Foxx can go back out into the world and do better and use this justice system to the best of our abilities. Do I personally believe that? No. And I'll tell you the scene that let me know that I can't trust this man. When he's in the bunker, right? They're locked in. He's the new DA. He's like, we got to figure this out. Let me find these buildings, blah, 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 whatever. And I had forgotten earlier in the film, he said, I don't need to look at the crime scene photos. That's not what I do. He finally, for the first time, sees the carnage that we witnessed with Gerard Butler. And he goes, all right, I get it. I get it now, Clyde. And I was like, you fucking sack of shit. You absolute sack of human shit. That now you're like, well, dead's one thing, but these pictures, gross. That must have been a hard night. Like, now I understand. Like, the fact that he can divorce himself from what he's dealing with like that was a stunning moment to drop in the film that we're going to be like, oh, look, he is having an emotional awakening. And it's like, you fuck.
Well, I mean, the emotional awakening is like, oh, wow, I can't just be a totally aloof dickbag for the rest of my life. I have to actually address this.
He sent a man to the death penalty without having witnessed his crime. That's crazy. That shit cray.
It's nuts.
That shit cray. Let's just call it what it is. That shit cray. I mean, it's fucking.
It's weird.
And here's the
Even
other
the
thing.
Law and Order guys look at this. Look at those.
That's photos. All I know about police stations is rule one: every corkboard has dead bodies tacked to it. I've seen that in every movie and show. Here's all the death. Look at it.
You cannot deter me of that knowledge.
Yeah, you're going to learn from it. And I think that's kind of fucking important when you're dealing with sending someone to death row or who not to send to death row, right? Maybe if you looked at those pictures, he doesn't do the deal. The fucking thing about this movie that will drive you nuts about Jamie Foxx and this, is he or isn't he a good guy? He's the only character in the film that never for 1 second ever second guesses himself, right? This is the Richard Gere and Primal Fear playbook.
Just like a blueprint for lawyers and movies. I'm starting to get
Richard
that feeling.
Gere writes a narrative and believes it. This is different because Jamie Foxx knows that he fucking did wrong. Richard Gere believes that he is saving an innocent kid because that's what he wants to believe. Jamie Foxx knows in his soul that he fucked up. He knows that all of this is his fucking fault, right? Not that the blood is not necessarily on his hands, but he knows that it would have stopped with him had he done his fucking job properly. So he knows if nothing else, he was the fucking last straw, right? That when that grieving father saw him doing a handshake deal with the guy that desecrated his family, that was it. And the law-abiding citizen becomes a monster. There. Yeah, so the man who tells his daughter he locks the bad guys up created the worst one we see in the movie. And so for him to every scene, right? His co-worker, right? The lady, she asked him, if you could go back, would you? No, we did it. That's the best justice can do. So justice can't be absolute, but we did the best we could. No, you didn't. We know you didn't look at the crime scene photos. We know you weren't investigating enough. You did a fucking calculation and you ran. You fucking ran and you sent the wrong guy there. We know he was wrong. No. The mayor asked him. No. Bruce McGill asked him. No. And then even Bruce McGill's like, you don't believe that, do you?
Right.
Like indignant at the fact, like, it's okay. It's our job. We can admit that there's fuckery afoot.
Right.
But you can't be lying to yourself still that you did the best you could and that we're not somewhat responsible for this. Until the end of the fucking movie, never once does Jamie Foxx ever say that what he did is an act of corruption, which leaves me absolutely no fucking confidence and faith that this man can be changed, because somewhere in his mind, he's trying desperately to convince himself that he did what was right and just.
I mean, that's got to be what most district attorneys have to do generally. Like, it's an interesting thing in this movie that he does. Like, he almost, I don't know if you noticed this, he never fucking apologizes in this movie for any of it.
Never.
Like, and I sort of
how
this
about
like weird.
How about this? Let me take what you just said to the fucking ultimate example. How about when Gerard Butler sends the fucking murder porn DVD to his house and he doesn't apologize to his wife and daughter for having seen that? He doesn't even go home in time to comfort his daughter. She's already asleep. And he just tells him it's special effects. Not, hey, there's a madman who could send more tapes and or be coming for you. No, it's special effects.
It's this constant covering up. I agree. It's a constant cover up. I mean, besides it being like bad parenting, it's like continuous cover up of like how it's not even corruption. It's just how inept you are at defending the public from madmen. I think that's a really like this champion of the law. Like, I put the bad guys away. Like, that's how he sees himself. He sees himself through his child's eyes. So for him to fuck up so irrevocably and send the wrong man to prison, send the wrong man to a prison that does, for like a limited sentence and nothing else happen, for the wrong to be so absolute. Yeah, I think that it would be, you almost start convincing yourself like looking at yourself in the mirror becomes a difficult thing. Like, I am a good guy. I did the right thing. I did what I had to do for who though. Okay. And that's like the bigger thing I think that's the bigger issue the movie gets at a lot is like, what did you do? Who did you do for? And I think that's a really important part about the motivation for Clyde's character is like every single action that every person he kills, every person he puts in harm's way, probably besides that poor guy with the steak bone in his eyeball, are people who justified their own actions through whatever means they had to.
And I think that's the hard part is like, I just kept asking, why is he trying so hard to reach Nick and teach Nick rather than destroy Nick? And it cannot just be because Nick has a family. I couldn't quite make that leap because Nick is an actual sack of shit in this movie. Let's think about the other thing Nick does. How about 6 times saying, would your wife and daughter be proud of this? Hey, man, his wife and daughter were raped and murdered.
Yeah.
How about stop fucking trying to high ground him when you let the raper murderer fucking walk free to his hooker cocaine party? Stop throwing that in his fucking face. Like it's some kind. How about this? When he walks in and their first thing and he thinks he's going to breeze through a confession. Hey, I'm breaking all the rules here, but I'm a dad. I get it. I didn't look at the pictures, but I get it. I didn't read the case file, but I get it. Bravo. No complaints here. Knock 'em dead. That's what I say. Wait, me? Ah! Like that's the movie in a nutshell. But that's what I mean. Nick is such a fucking asshole. And it's funny because they weaponized Jamie Foxx's infinite, deep, beautiful wading pool of charm. You're like, I just want to stare into it and lather in it. It's amazing to be washed among it. And then they weaponize it to where his charm becomes even scummier. And it's unbearable. I hate Nick by the end of this movie with a passion. But I think this is kind of the fun game of the film, right? Because what it really is, the mastermind. I can be anywhere, see anything. I'm so fucking smart. I can do it. As he says, I will bring this disease system down on your head, right? It'll be biblical.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the line between I will bring this disease system down on your head, Nick, versus letting Nick skate through the whole film? Or is Nick simply supposed to bear witness, right? Because again, this does play more as a fable.
That's what I would go with. Like, it's like Job. Like, Job literally had to go through all that shit to prove his faith. So instead of it being proving faith, it's about proving that you learn.
That the legal system worked honestly, when you just blew a guy.
To be honest with you, like, I think bear witness is a much better.
Yeah.
It makes more sense and is more resolutely about what this movie seems to be getting at. Because I think, yes, there's a fable attached here somewhere, but then where you're just like, hang on. I feel like lesson's been lost ever since we blew that judge's head off. Like, I need to like rein it in a little bit here and decide. So like, I think that bearing witness to, again, I go back to this, bearing witness to man's law versus the law is what I think Nick's punishment is, I guess.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this, right? So at the end, the movie keeps saying, not at the end, more at the beginning, right? You can't fight fate.
Right.
That's how I think of the theme of this movie, right?
Right.
Who or what represents fate more in this film, right? Because I would say that Clyde was not fated to be this fucking murderer. He was a normal. I mean, I guess you could say his gift was murder. They say that he'd already killed, but for justified reasons.
Sure.
You can't fight fate, right? Is that just no one's going to change? No one's going to learn. This is just how it is. The system will always be corrupt and broken. I don't know. I mean, is this movie telling us we can't fucking change anything for the better?
I mean, I think in the context of the movie,
is F. Gary Gray trying to tell us it's over?
I mean, I don't think the man who brought us straight out of Compton's telling us it's over. I think that more than likely, I mean, to me, it's
so you do take an optimistic tone away from the ending, though.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to not.
Are you fighting fate, Alex? Is that what you're doing?
Not fighting fate. I think that the concept of fighting fate throughout the movie changes. So like it begins as a very cynical thing. You can't fight fate. It's a very, very cynical approach to the law. It's a cynical approach to the justice system at large. In the middle of the movie, you can't fight fate means that you can't undo what you've already done. You're fated to die. You're fated to die at the hands of this man that you've wronged. And then by the end of the movie, you can't fight fate ends up inversing itself onto Clyde, saying like, you know that you've now done wrong. You have done the thing that you should not have done. You want to seek true justice. You must yourself atone for the injustice you've caused. So by seeking revenge, he is fated to die anyways. So now it's in Jamie Foxx's character's hands to keep fatal, like to let fate play out. It's not his job to get a guy in a situation where he can like get a deal. That's not fate. That's intervening.
So before he was twisting fate.
He's twisting fate to his own methodology. What Clyde spends the movie trying to teach Jamie Foxx is that you can't fight fate when fate is at your front doorstep. So don't try to bend the will. Don't try to bend the will of fate because it'll snap back.
Yeah. And I think this is probably the most cathartic of the courtroom movies we'll do, right? Because this one is taking because I feel like all these movies are just legal shenanigans, right? You know, every movie we've covered, Emily Rose ends with the girl dead.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're just fucking doing this malarkey about, was it God or was it this priest or was it a mix of all these people, right?
Right.
Primal Fear was, oh, I got you on a chokehold, loophole. You know, rub the pantsuit, run away. Oh, fuck, he's guilty after all. And this one's kind of the same. Devil's Advocate is like literally just the fucking devil.
Yeah.
So it's always about these ropes, right? This one is the most cathartic because this is the one where when you fuck around in the courtroom, we bring this shit out into the world and it takes a second. And it says, what if we can't believe in the court system, right? And, you know, there's a lot of evidence that we have a lot of problems with that shit, right?
Yes.
It's not always great. So if we can't trust them to do it, right? What happens if we go Lord of the Flies and every citizen starts doing this now? What if every citizen becomes the modern day Punisher? Where they're like, well, I feel like my mission's okay, so let's have at it. And it's just fucking anarchy and blood in the streets. And I think this is the one that really looks at this question of the courtroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
In maybe the most cinematic way, if that makes sense, because it's just this an actual battle of good and evil that is more than just of the minds and ends in kind of a uh-oh.
Right.
Like, you remember how The Blob ends in a question mark? I feel like that's how every court movie ends in a question mark. Whoa, except for this one.
This one ends in this one unfolds in a very specific way, in that it's truly about the court itself, but it's what happens outside the court that matters. And I think that's a really important thing that a lot of the other movies that we've watched, besides maybe Emily Rose, haven't really been about, to be honest with you. Like, they've been about the intrinsic value of the courts itself. This one is about the lack of value the courts provide and how important it is for us to take matters into our own hands a lot of the time.
Well, just imagine that scene that even has the Saw lighting and aesthetics.
Absolutely.
Right? So when he's like, I'm going to cut your dick off with this. I'm going to cut your limbs off. You're going to feel it all. You're going to look at this picture of my murder family. Hey, I got a glass ceiling that normally only swingers have. So you can watch me do it. You'll know everything.
Yeah, by the way.
That's the scene where we all say, good. I'm glad. That is a horrifying moment where that big giant fuck mirror, we should all look in that and go, ooh, boy.
By the way, point of order, he says he invented it or he made it himself. You bought that shit off eBay. I know for a fact you did, all right?
Wait, he said he invented mirrors?
No. He said he was like, oh, look, I built this one myself. I'm like, no, dude. You bought that shit off a swinger website. I know exactly what website you went to get it. Don't even front.
I'm not saying that I have shopped for these, but I know kind of a little bit about dabbling. Mine would have been for the celebration of life, not the chopping.
I was going to say, listen, I've worked on sex toy shows. I know where those motherfuckers come from. I know exactly the website you bought it from.
Were you Talon? Is that what?
But that's my IMDb cred. I will not.
Imagine a film that says when that guy gets brutally harmed and, blood's leaking through his body in the death penalty chamber. Good. Fuck him. That guy's getting cut apart. Good. Fuck him. Gerard Butler comes in, and honestly, I don't think it's until he stabs that cellmate that you're like, maybe I should not full-throatedly root for them. The movie's constantly putting us in this unwinnable scenario. It's asking us what is justice, and I don't know if in this film we see any of it.
I don't disagree. I think we see shades of it, and I think that's the thing that the movie asks us, is to be okay with the shades of justice it presents. So if you can stomach, if at all, the level of justice that maybe you're comfortable with, maybe you're willing to take the ride with the movie for a little bit more. And I mean, that to me is the really complicated thing about Law-Abiding Citizen, is no one's absolved of their sins in this movie, least of all Nick, of course. But Nick gets the second chance granted to him by a man who he desperately wronged.
Yeah, and I mean, he might have wronged him, but again, does he deserve all of this biblical punishment? That's what I think the movie is saying, is that, because that's the fun game of this movie, right? Is what a lot of people will remember is the awesome one-liners, right? Like, it's going to be biblical. There's so many great, amazing lines in this film, right? They're going to remember the answering the cell phone and the shock of that moment. They'll remember the T-bone steak shank. Right, they're gonna remember all those cars blowing up. That was incredible.
There's a ton of visual. There's a ton of awesome visual action set pieces.
Yeah, the action pieces and the thriller stuff are really fun. Yes. What I was completely unprepared for, and what separates this from the other movies that sink to the bottom of those $5 bins, is there's a really taut emotional core to this film that sinks into your very stomach. So as you're having all the fun and games, you still have to grapple with some big, heavy issues, right? There is value in examining humanity through this way, and, allowing yourself to play the fun game of it, but leaving it being, not thinking about the cell phone gun, but like, wow, that's fucked up. Who was right? And that's what I did not expect from this movie, is how well it does both.
I was not prepared to question who I thought was right at the end of the movie, and I like that a lot. I think that's, I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this because I would have never said it 24 hours ago, but Law-Abiding Citizen might be a movie worth watching. I
think it's a movie that kicks fucking ass. I think the movie's so awesome, good that even if the ending left me a little, I think it's one of those I'm going to keep watching and keep enjoying more and more. It's a fucking awesome movie. That's it. The verdict's in. Awesome movie. All right, guys. The pod has one more case to take. We will be representing 12 of the angriest men you've ever seen in movies. So that'll be next week. I hope you guys have been enjoying our guest hosts. We have some amazing ones coming up. So make sure you download that. Please share the show on your socials with all your friends. Get the word out there. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you find the show. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Film Alchemist. Please send us an email at filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, letting us know what you want us to talk about. And more than anything, thanks for joining us, guys. For the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey.
I am Alex Dandino.